Well, hello, my people, STEM to Roots. This is your host, Mike Demba. Today, I want to do this differently. But of late, I've gone in depth, in trying to figure out, ways to bring information that will help us here in the discussion we want to have here at STEM to Roots. Okay. And the topic that I want to talk about, I called it Africa's biggest disconnect. All right. Today's reality versus tomorrow's promise. Now, how is that relevant to STEM to Roots? As we talk about this today, there's a few conversations that I will bring. These are big time conversations by big time people. And in whatever their viewpoint is in where our world is right now as far as Africans go, I believe by the time we finish this discussion, you'll see how it's relevant to STEM to Roots. Okay, STEM to Roots, just as a reminder, what we want to talk about here is the fact that Africa as a continent has had its sons and daughters leave with hopes of returning, and they don't. All right. So there's various reasons why they don't return back. There's various reasons why even when they return, it's just a visit. They leave and live forever. So there's many reasons that we can't discuss now. That's why we have the podcast. That's why we have the channel where we will discuss these things, extensively from people's opinion, from what their experiences have been. So those reasons collectively have made people leave the continent. And here we are today as we speak. All right, this is 2023, where we are, I believe, where we are as a continent, where we are headed, where these big time people think we are headed and where we should be. There's a huge disconnect because, Africa is full of hope. Africa is full of just, flowery, beautiful future that we keep talking about. But how people feel today, because like they say, today is all we have, right? How people feel today is just, there's the gap between that is just huge, and I feel it's important. That's why I want to bring this up here at STEM to Roots. Okay, so we will go straight to the discussion, the few things that I want us to listen to, and then we'll discuss. Yeah, all right. So before I head over to what I want to share, guys, you know what to do. I want you guys to be a part of the family. Feel at home, all right? Just hit like, subscribe, because a lot of this will be coming, and I want you to be a part of it. All right, I'll shut up. I'll shut up. Let's just go.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Makila James, a senior advisor here at the U.S. Institute of Peace Africa Center, and it's my distinct honor and pleasure to be moderating this conversation with Ambassador Kimani. Ambassador Kimani, we thought we would have you do some opening remarks, but more importantly, let's just get right into the conversation because I think you're a great conversationalist. We'd rather just start the conversation right away.
Let's do it.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about, Ambassador Kimani, is this narrative around Africa right now. Where are we in the narrative of what is Africa? What is Africa's trajectory? What is its future? The long-held narrative that we all know on Africa is Africa as a poor continent, high unemployment, destabilizing internal conflicts, expansion of violent terrorist threats, and coups and counter coups. And that narrative has been a long-standing one.
Yes.
It basically speaks to an Africa that doesn't have any influence in multilateral fora,
Yes.
an Africa that is too poor and troubled to really be a global player.
Yes.
Then we turn to what is the reality on the ground. We look at the reality on the ground today. Very different narrative. You see
Wait. Before you even go there, she just went through a list of what, the perception of Africa is, right? This is what the world believes Africa to be, right? All these negative things, like no stability, poor continent, not peaceful, chaos, people that are a bunch of people that are always going to look for a better life outside of the continent. The list goes on as far as the perception of Africa. Perception from the outside. But how about the people? have we gotten to that point where these perceptions we believe ourselves? Because we can lie to ourselves. We can't keep saying, oh, this is what they think of Africa. What do we think of Africa? Right? So if one leaves Africa to go look for a better place, right? If you're looking for a better place, it's in contrast to what? It's contrast to Africa, right? So we go look for a better life. We go look for opportunities. We go look for a place we can maximize what we can bring in as far as economically. So this is the perception the world has. But let's put the world aside. Let's think about Africa itself. What do we believe? All right. So what we believe versus our actions. Are we forcing ourselves into believing Africa is all flowery and we're all good and it's great and stuff, or do our actions actually show that? Right. Let's see where she thinks Africa is. So she's calling it a perception. Let's see where she actually thinks Africa is.
The African governments and African people setting their own agenda for politics and security and economics. You look at the African Union's historic African Continental Free Trade Agreement, game changer for the continent. You look at what's happening with the political affairs, Peace and Security Commission, really struggling with some really difficult challenges on the continent. You look at the African Union condemning and sanctioning coup leaders. And most significantly for many of us, this dynamism of young people who are creative and entrepreneurial and who are driving technology on the continent. So then you have this narrative of unstoppable Africa. So between unstoppable Africa and troubled Africa that really can't be a global player and is almost outside of history in some people's image, where do you see Africa falling today?
Well, Mr. Ambassador, wait now. Wait. Yeah. Before he answers, here it is. That's the colorful Africa. Beautiful. The African Union, like a historic kind of like free trade between African countries, all that cool stuff. Africa on the global stage, beginning to have a stance, all that cool stuff, right? If that's the reality right now, I feel like extensively, to a very huge extent, we still believe that everything that she just talked about is actually something that we don't see on a daily basis as Africans, from the youth to the people that live there, to the people that leave, to the people that live outside looking in. I don't think we see this flowery Africa that she just talked about. But let's hear Mr. Ambassador. Who am I? I'm just the host of Seb to Roots. What do I know?
Thank you. We've gone straight into it. Thank you, and good morning. We all know that Africa needs to tell its story more. We all know that there's so much more happening that is positive and even transformative on the continent.
Okay.
And the question, I think, is why is there a persistent continuity of this narrative of helplessness?
Okay.
And I think that has some form of structural life now. It's not just ignorance. It's a way in which Africa is positioned in global affairs.
Okay.
And it's been centuries in the making.
Okay.
And it's going to be some time before we emerge fully from it.
Okay.
But in the process of emerging from it, I think we can embrace how dramatic a shift there has been in Africa. If you look at our demography, for instance, 100 years ago, there were just over 100 million Africans on the continent.
100 million Africans.
In 20 years or so, in just under 30 years, in 2050, they're going to be 2.5 billion. This is a sea change in terms of demography. But it's not just numbers. It's the youthfulness of those numbers. And the youthfulness expressing such a diversity of cultural intelligence that is expressed in the arts, in the way people live, in the way they express themselves, in the way they practice religion. So this huge energy on the ground is going to make Africa a pivotal force in the 21st century. And our work as policymakers and this generation of policymakers is to ensure that that incredible energy is translated into an unstoppable Africa that is unstoppable to the extent of its economic development, in its projection and export of peace and security into the world, for it to be a major pole of global economic growth, for it to lead in the energy transition and climate change responsibility. I think we're headed in that direction, but we have some considerable challenges.
Please, you give me all this good news, you want to go to challenge. Let's talk about that first. That's beautiful stuff. Everything Ambassador Martin Kimani just talked about is beautiful. This is a big time guy, all right? Martin Kimani is the Kenyan. He's a Kenyan diplomat, all right? He's Kenyan rep to the United Nations. So everything he's talking about, he knows, all right? These are people that have access to data that we don't have. These are people that have access to a staff that feed them with this information that is powerful, that is just based on just good stuff, like he just mentioned. So look at that hopeful Africa that he just talked about, right? I've wrote a few things here, you know, a jump from 100 million people to 2.5 billion. The great thing about that, the great thing about a population like that, especially the youthfulness of that population, is big economies like China and India now, you know, who are in those billions as far as numbers. They've gotten where they've gotten today, as fast as they got there, because their economy changed to kind of like a consumer economy, like where they had enough people demanding goods and services for them to be able to actually make those things that they're able to then sell to the people and serve the people, for them to grow that fast, because there's a lot of people, all that production going on, there's a lot of people actually consuming it, right? So Africa as a continent has gotten to that level of population where, yes, there's hope in that shift happening, where there's enough people to consume anything that comes, whether it's in the form of a business, whether it's like production, whether it's just consumer goods. We've gotten where there will be enough demand that will actually have this churning machine of like economic power, right? And that's why it's important that we mention those numbers that he just mentioned. But he's not the only big time person talking about this. I'm going to show you more.
Africa is the oldest inhabited continent in the world.
Okay.
And it is home to the youngest population in the world. So Africa cannot help but be in the future business. I strongly believe that the creativity and ingenuity of Africa's young leaders will help us shape the future of the world.
Okay.
And that their ideas, your ideas, and innovations and initiatives will benefit the entire world. The Biden-Harris administration intends to be right there alongside you, these young leaders.
We all know her. This is the Vice President of the United States. Powerful woman. The very first Vice President that's a woman. I can't believe the US, after all these centuries of existing, this is the first time we have a US Vice President that's a woman. And she made history by being a first woman and a first Black woman. All right. That said, again, just like I spoke about the ambassador right there, big time. This is the Vice President of the US. Enormous staff. They have access to data that we don't have. So everything she's talking about is not being made up. It's something they see in the projections. You know, the issue with Africa's partnership with US leaders is the fact that the way politics is here in the US, the way things just keeps shifting, where Kamala and Joe Biden, 2024, they will go through an election that if they lose, and let's say a Republican comes in, whatever agenda they were on already, will be thrown in the trash. There's no, the American government is where there's no business continuity. Every time they change government, they just take everything and dump it. and have their own agenda, you know, until the next person that comes, you know, they will start fresh again. So that's why I'm never hopeful with that level of partnership between the US and Africa, because there's no continuity. There's always like a start and stop, and start and stop, and start and stop. All right, I'm not here to dampen the mood. Let's go back to what she just talked about, because that one is fact, no matter who comes in as a leader, right? The youthfulness of the African continent is an asset. All right, it's an asset. I can't wait for us to get to the disconnect. That's what she just said, right? Let's go. Let's listen to another big time person.
2050 is important in a discussion about Africa's future prospects. It is the halfway mark of this remarkable century, which has in a few short years seen great advances in digital technology, a global financial crisis, and of course, a frightening pandemic. 2050 is also the target date which many countries in the world have set to attain net zero carbon emissions. And this is true, of course, for African countries as well. Also, when we discuss global demographics, 2050 is usually the reference date, and Africa is expected to have just over a quarter of global population, 26.3%, up from 18.2% in 2020. It's also estimated that over half of the population, the largest number of young people in the world, would live in Africa by that date. And as we know, population size is intrinsically linked to economic size and inherent in the very notions of poverty, per capita income, and the size of the labor market, which of course are related to growth.
Yes.
But what must be done in Africa to make growth work? What do we really need to do? On the one hand, Africa is making steady progress on several fronts.
Is it?
Despite challenges post-COVID-19, Africa is growing well compared to the rest of the world.
Okay.
The IMF World Economic Outlook for October 2022 projected that sub-Saharan Africa would be the second fastest growing region of the world at 3.7%, compared to 4.9% in emerging Asia, 1.7% in Latin America, and the Caribbean, 3.6%. In the Middle East and Central Asia, 1% in the United States, and about 0.5% in the Euro area. Of course, we can always make the counterpoint that
Okay. You guys know him? Do you guys know him? This is the professor himself. All right? His Excellency, this is the Vice President of Nigeria. We as Africans know there is nothing that can be done in Africa. There's nothing that can be done in Africa without going through Nigeria. Nigeria is very, very important. And this guy is big time. Again, just like I said about the two big time people, he has access to data and information and staff and people that work for him that bring all this good stuff to talk about, right? So he just mentioned where Africa is headed, all this good stuff that's coming. All right, so let's go way back to what this whole topic is about. Like I said, Africa's biggest disconnect, right? Today's reality as we speak today, right? All right, versus tomorrow's promise. Tomorrow's promise is glowing, it's beautiful. But where are we today? Is everything that we just heard, all these beautiful things that are coming, is this what this youth that they're talking about, these people, young people that they're talking about, is this what they believe? Is this what they believe? The proof is in the pudding, right? No, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So, so let's see whether everything that shows the proof is actually showing that all of us in Africa, in the continent, in the diaspora, whether we believe what we just heard. Let's listen to one more big time person. All right, let's listen to one more big time person. I'm gonna shut up now.
Excellencies, I'm certain that all of us gathered at this event have become accustomed to news headlines such as at least 43 African migrants drown off Libya, UN agencies say. African migrants drown as boat sails to Spain. At least 140 migrants drown off Senegal coast, UN says. For those of us who come from a continent that is in possession of some 30% of the Earth's remaining mineral resources and some 50% of the world's arable lands, it is disheartening to acknowledge that African youths do not see a future in their respective countries and are willing to cross the Sahara Desert on foot and drown in the Mediterranean Sea in a desperate bid to reach the mirage of a better life in Europe. It is eloquent testimony to the inability of the current structures of African economies, producing and exporting raw materials, importing manufactured goods and services from Europe and elsewhere, to generate those of decent, well-paying jobs that Africa's youth crave. But fortunately, there's now a consensus amongst the current crop of African leaders.
Let's not even go to the good news of our president. We all know him. He's the president of Ghana. He is big time. Again, going back to the level of access they have to information and data. Did you guys hear what he just talked about? Did you guys just hear him, right? Africa is where, with all that flowery stuff that we just heard, all this good stuff about our continent, the reality today is all these people that are dying trying to leave the continent, right? These are people that, like, for me personally, like he just mentioned, the last report was 140 dying off of the coast of Senegal. So off of the coast of Senegal, if you know, I'm from Gambia. If you know your map, Gambia is inside Senegal. So these are Senegambian people coming from that Senegal, Gambia region, Mali, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, trying to head over, to Europe by way of, in Gambia, they even coined a term for it. They call it back way. Back way meaning, poor and destitute youths that take everything that they own, literally, their parents selling, their land and property and livestock, and just gathering money whichever way they can, hand them cash. This is encouraged by parents, actually, because a few will make it. Hand them cash and tell them, go, try your luck. So they go through these dangerous paths, to try to get to Europe, by way of foot, any means of transportation, paying smugglers, whichever way possible, just to have a taste of Europe, where they're hoping that they will find something better than what they're leaving behind. This is the disconnect that I'm talking about, right? If there's this level of hope and belief and all that cool stuff that they are talking about, how come the entire continent feels this way? And this is not unique to West Africa. Not long ago, I was in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe, South Africa and stuff, and it's the same sentiment. So this is a feeling across the continent where people don't feel this same level of optimism about what's coming to the continent, or the amount of resource the continent has, whether it's being able to provide that labor force that will bring Africa up, whether it's the resources where we have over 30% of the reserved world, what did he just call it, reserve of minerals, all of that good stuff that we have is not one that is reaching the masses. And so they're leaving in numbers, in droves, like dying to get out of the continent. Those of us that are outside already, stuck outside, after our education, after making it to a certain level, the level of risk in leaving a place that is more stable as far as like economically to go to Africa is one that is risky. Why is it risky? That level of feeling, is one that is keeping a lot of people in the diaspora away from home. And what we're hearing right now, there's a huge gap there. And I don't know how we'll fill this gap. Let's listen to one more person.
Ambassador, you spoke very eloquently to this issue of African youth demographic and what does it really mean for the continent.
Yes.
And I'm glad to see some African youth in the audience today. Well, many of us consider ourselves African youth, but some real African youth in the audience.
Okay.
Do you get a sense from African young people that they feel this degree of optimism, or do you pick up a greater sense of either resignation or pulling back and just operating outside of government and outside of politics because they don't see that changing fast enough or meeting their aspirations?
Well, I don't want to make any blanket sort of assessment. I don't have the tools to answer that question comprehensively. But I do know there is impatience. There is impatience. There's impatience with economic models that are not inclusive enough. There's impatience because young people have, broadly speaking, carried out their end of the deal. And the deal as I was growing up was go to school,
yes,
finish school,
yes,
and we will have opportunity waiting for you.
Go to school, make your grades, and there will be opportunity for you, and you'll get a good job. Aha! This is what a lot of African countries are facing, right? Like he just said, and I agree with you, Ambassador. I agree with you. Where for the youth, for the young people, their part is done. Where they go to school, they have their grades, they're ready to work, and there's no job. Where I'm from, in Gambia right now, every year, like 1,000 students will graduate. And when I say 1,000 students will graduate university, I'm talking about Gambia here. Let's talk about scale here. Gambia is, the population is about, 2 million, give or take, with foreigners and stuff. So when I say 1,000 people graduate, that's a big number. That's a big number. So if you're looking at like 1,000 plus, like last I checked was 1,300 Gambians that just graduated university with their bachelor's degree. And we have kids graduating higher education at a level that the government and the country is not meeting as far as giving them jobs. So they do their part and they just sit around. Last I was having a discussion with friends on the number of kids that graduated with their law degrees. And Gambia is a place that has this, we have our Supreme Court, we have our local courts that are a handful, right? Gambia is not a country that has that level of litigation to have all those lawyers in service. We don't have that level of litigation to keep all those little lawyers or young lawyers busy enough, right? So what are they doing with a law degree? So that kind of thing, like he just mentioned it. I didn't say it, he said it. He's big time, I'm small time.
Countries, our young people have done that. They've gone to school, they've gotten educated, they've gotten skills. They have ambition and they want to work.
Yes.
Now they're looking to us to say, okay, I did my part.
Yes, there. This is what I wanted to bring up today. Like this huge disconnect between beautiful Africa and what's going on right now. And I hope, as far as this information goes, whether it's manifesting it into reality, whether this is coming to Africa, what I hope is the case is where we as Africans, those that are at home and those that are away, get to that point real quick where all of us have this feeling, so that patience that the Ambassador Martin just mentioned will be one that comes with, all right, good reasons to wait around, right? Having a decent job to wait around and not rush out, especially in that kind of dangerous manner. Right? I hope, those that are outside get to a place where they don't feel like going home is risky, where they feel like, all right, being able to invest at home is risky, where they feel like, all right, Africa is where I'm from and where I want to be, because that's where the future is headed. The global future is headed as far as opportunity goes. I hope we get there. Let's discuss, please. I need to hear from you, and I want to know what you think. All right. Until the next one, guys, you know what to do. Please be a part of this discussion. Come on, you're part of this family, man. Bye, bye.